As the president of the college, I get lots of, I should say, privileges. And one of the privileges is I get to introduce our VIPs. I get to introduce our celebrated guests. So today, I get to introduce the student who is responsible for coordinating this event. And she is going to introduce our guest today. So I want to just start by thanking the faculty, the dean of the business division, and thanking the Linda Whitten and all of the faculty who are responsible for the Business Speaker Series for doing this work, putting this together so that we can have robust, creative, intellectually curious conversations on this campus that enrich your educational experiences. And if we have community members here in the audience, then I also want to thank you for being here and welcome you here to Skyline College, because this is the cultural center of this area, and we want to make sure that you are accessing and availing yourselves to all of the wonderful riches that are here at Skyline College, through the faculty, staff, and students that are here to serve you. The student that I'm going to introduce is Monica Diliberto. And Monica is the student coordinator for this event. Very important because the engagement of the students is really makes a difference in terms of the college and campus life. But it also makes a difference in their own leadership development. She, in her time here at Skyline College, she has served as the Vice President of Kappa Beta Delta International Business, the International Business Honor Society. So that's an honor society that you get inducted into. In order to be inducted into that honor society, which I am a proud member of also, you have to have maintained at least a 3.4 GPA, but you also have to be in the top 20% of all of your classes. And she was inducted last year. While she's completing her her studies as a business administration major, she also is minoring in mathematics here. And this fall, she'll be transferring to the University of California, Berkeley, to their Haas School of Business. Now, Monica also was one of there were 11 recipients of the Kappa Beta Delta International Scholarship. From across the land, they choose 11 people. Skyline College is the only community college that has business programs that are accredited in the way that ours is. And so in order to be selected for that type of scholarship, you have to come from a program that's accredited by the ACDSP. And that means that aside from the 2 students who were selected from across this land that were selected from Skyline College, all the others are at universities. Monica was one of the students that was selected for this international scholarship. So that's to give you an idea of the prestige. Monica, it also speaks a lot about the integrity of the programs that are here that produce that kind of student and scholarship. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Monica Diliberto.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Stanback-Stroud. Hello, my name is Monica Diliberto, and I would like to welcome you all to a town hall address to Congresswoman Jackie Speier. So before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that following this speech, we will have a question and answer portion. So you guys have all been provided with note cards upon your arrival. Therefore, if you have a question to ask our speaker, I ask that you please write it down on the note card and pass it to the end of your aisle where a student will be collecting your questions. Okay, so Jackie Speier has lived her entire life inside California's 14th Congressional District, and in April 2008 was elected to represent the district in Congress. In total, she has served over 30 years of public service. Jackie serves on the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, where she is ranking member of the Subcommittee on Energy Policy, Healthcare, and Entitlements. She is also a member of her party's leadership team as senior whip, working within the Democratic caucus to push issues that will create jobs and strengthen the middle class. In January 2013, Jackie was appointed to serve as a vice chair of a new Congressional Gun Violence Prevention Task Force that is investigating new steps Congress can take now and in the future to reduce gun violence. So, Without further ado, I would like to warmly welcome to the stage Congresswoman Jackie Speier.
So pleased to be here, in particular to be able to spend time with you, and also because I'm home. I can't tell you how difficult it is to spend the weeks in Washington when we cease to get anything done, but we'll get to that later in the program. So Monica, thank you very much for that introduction. Dr. Standack-Stroud, thank you for this opportunity to be with you. Now, I was asked to speak about business ethics. So for about 20 minutes, I'm going to speak about business ethics, and then we're going to open up the questions. And I don't want you to feel constrained in asking me questions just about business ethics. We can talk about any issue that is on your mind. But since you have given me this challenge, and since you're all business students, is that right? How many are business students? How many are science students? How many are political science students? So well, what I'm about to give you is going to be worthy of your consideration no matter what profession you suggest is your pathway to success. I'm calling these the 12 commandments of business ethics. The first one, thou shalt be steadfast to your moral principles as much as you are to your finances. So when I came to Congress, I came in April of 2008. Does anyone remember what was going on in April 2008? Housing crisis was just starting to bubble up. But Bear Stearns, remember Bear Stearns? They went belly up. And everyone thought, oh, well, this is just a little glitch, not real. And then over the course of 2008, the entire financial services industry imploded. I was the youngest, not by age, but in tenure in Congress, the youngest member on the Financial Services Committee. So I sat in the lowest rung. And I was actually seated in a position where whoever was being questioned by the members of the committee, I was eyeball to eyeball with them. So imagine my interest and somewhat my surprise when I walk into my very first hearing, and there is Secretary Paulson and Ben Bernanke telling us that we didn't have anything to worry about. Now, as part of this first commandment, I want you to think about Bernie Madoff. We had a hearing in which a real giant came forward. A man who had done the numbers crunching and was very clear that you could not possibly have the kinds of returns that Bernie Madoff was offering his clients. And he went to the SEC and he gave them chapter and verse on what didn't make sense about Bernie Madoff's company. What did the SEC do? Well, the SEC actually went and interviewed Bernie Madoff. And one of the simplest questions that was asked of him was, who is your custodian from which all the money flows? And he rattled off a name. And he expected within 3 days that he would be shut down. But he wasn't shut down in 3 days because no one bothered to call the custodian that he identified to determine whether or not they were the custodian of the money. So he continued his Ponzi scheme, which turned out to be the biggest Ponzi scheme in our history, $65 billion in losses to investors. You know, at least one of his sons now curses the family name. Bernie Madoff is now serving consecutive life sentences in federal prison. But it took something that egregious to bring him down. When the SEC probably could have done it much sooner if they had just listened to this one whistleblower. It was a little quirky, but nonetheless, it was right on the money. The second commandment, thou shalt remember that doing good can be a great business model. You've heard the line, doing well by doing good. There's plenty of examples in the business world of companies that have done just that. Kellogg's, an interesting story, in fact. This man was providing homes for people who were disabled, and he needed to feed them breakfast every morning. And one day, this baked cornmeal dish that he was making turned out to be overcooked. Enter cornflakes. Hershey's Kisses. When the chocolate company started, it was the way for an orphanage to make money. And now, how can we live without Hershey's Kisses, right? Third commandment, thy work-life balance shall be maintained. Boy, I gotta tell you, I talk to CEOs of companies, men and women. I talk to middle managers. And I have founded an organization called Professional Businesswomen of California. We're now in our 24th year. We have a big conference every year. What's the number one issue that all these middle and top management women want to talk about? Work-life balance. So, one of the commandments is, you gotta maintain it. The President of the United States has dinner with his family every night. Now, if the President of the United States can do that, don't you think we can do that? When I was a state legislator in Sacramento, I used to drive home 3 out of 4 nights a week. 2 hours to Sacramento, 2 hours back. I was a single parent at the time, and my number one obligation was to my kids. And so I got home, sometimes 7:30, sometimes 8, not always having dinner with them, but always having at least an hour or so to spend some time with them. So that's a very important component in your life as you pursue your careers. The fourth commandment, thou shalt create value, not just wealth. It's a real struggle that we all have. Do you just go for the money? Or do you do what you have a passion for that may not generate the same amount of income? And are you creating value? You know, I look at teachers in particular. They get maligned by some folks because, oh, they get 3 months off in the middle of the summer. You know, what a cushy job. Have you ever tried teaching 2 or 3 classes? It's exhausting. And then they go home and they have to grade papers. And then they have to be the mental health counselors in the schools. And then they have to be the sex educators in the schools. And before you know it, we have shifted a lot of responsibilities into our teachers. So, Thomas Edison founded the General Electric Company, went from candles to the incandescent light bulb. He had lots of failures before he finally had that discovery. Failure is part of success. But not only did he found the General Electric Company, but he founded a very valuable asset that we all appreciate today. Fifth commandment, thou shalt worship democracy, not money, and you'll get both. So the free market system and democracy reinforce each other. If you look at the nations with the most individual liberty, they tend to be the ones that have the freest markets because individuals have the ability to make good choices and the freedom to explore. And that's why, particularly in this region, you know, we call California the left coast sometimes. We don't call it that, but the folks I deal with in Washington oftentimes call it that. But it is, in fact, this left coast with the freedom to think and to experiment that has given us every big industry of the last 40 years. You know, I'm very proud to represent this area. And I go to my colleagues and I say, yes, well, I represent the biotechnology hub. It was the birthplace of biotechnology in my district, Genentech. There are now 40 companies in South San Francisco alone doing biotechnology. I also have YouTube in my district, just blocks away from you. Big social media company. I have one of the biggest companies in the world dealing with AZT and all of the drugs that have come since then to help us deal with the AIDS crisis. You then move down the peninsula, all the gaming companies headquartered in this region, whether it's Electronic Arts or Sony, all of it, smack dab in the middle of our county. And then you take my district and go a little bit farther south. Again, more technology companies trying to take us to the next level in terms of healthcare. Proteus is a company just at the edge of doing something pretty remarkable in terms of putting a little microchip into drugs, into pills, and as you ingest them, sending a message to your phone that you have taken your pills, and also to record your activity level. And then if you want to share that with your doctor, you can do so. Imagine what that's going to do for us moving forward. And then many new companies called, that are dealing with the issue of personalized medicine, which I'll get to in just a moment. So we are indeed very lucky, but it is because we have that freedom to explore. It's because we have the kinds of higher institutions of learning that create that opportunity. Here at Skyline, at UCSF, USF, if you move down to Stanford, all of that is going on right among us. In fact, one of my favorite stories is a story about a venture capitalist who met with a professor over some beers at Perry's in San Francisco. You know where that is on Union Street? How many of you have been to Perry's on Union Street? Most of your hands should go up. So the two of them sit down in the middle of an afternoon, drink some beers, and at the end of that conversation, they shook hands and founded a company. Do you know what company that was? Genentech. They didn't just found a company, they founded a new industry. So whether it's Gilead dealing with AIDS, or now Hep C and Hep B, all over us, all around us, great opportunities to advance. The next commandment, thou shalt always look yourself in the mirror after you've made a decision. And ask yourself, is this good for America? You know, they oftentimes say that if you don't want to see it on the front page of the New York Times, then don't do it. They say that to those of us who are politicians. But it's a good measurement. But let me give you an example of where I think we have gone awry in terms of not being able to look ourselves in the mirror. The TSA folks, you're all familiar with them. They're part of Homeland Security. They are the folks that are at the airport that do the screenings when we go through. I found out not so long ago that they had given a contract to a company in the South to make their uniforms. And then when they got the contract, the company realized that there wasn't a provision that they had to actually make them in the United States. So they shifted the manufacturing of those uniforms to their manufacturing plant in Mexico and shut down their manufacturing plant in the South. And about 500 jobs were lost. Now, is that good for America? How many of you have iPhones? iPads. Where are they made? Well, they're clearly not made in the United States, correct? And I was very dismayed recently when Tim Cook, who is the CEO, was asked about this. And when you look at the revenues that come into the United States from the iPad and iPhone, it's de minimis. It's very small as compared to the revenues that are generated in Korea and China and Japan and Germany. And Tim Cook said, we're a global company. We can't be bothered with being responsible for what's going on in America. Now, do I take a little glee that the stock has dropped a little bit? I'm a big iPad fan, but I refuse to have an iPhone because they're not made here. And I think that we need to send a very strong message, which actually they have heard most recently, and now they're talking about making it in America. Because when you do make it in America, everybody makes it in America. And many companies are actually bringing their business back to America, really for some very profit and loss reasons, because now the cost of transporting the goods from overseas has become much more expensive. The workers overseas are learning about unions and want higher wages, which is a good thing. And so their costs are going up. So all of a sudden they're recognizing that maybe it's actually cheaper to make it in America. So General Electric, for one, is bringing all of its manufacturing of their washers and dryers back into the United States. That's a good thing for America. The next commandment is, thou shalt always think of your legacy. Because I represent this very exciting district, I meet with some really talented scientists from time to time. One of them is a woman by the name of Kim Popovich, who runs a company called Genomic Health in Redwood City. I want you to watch this company. They are going to do great things for America. And she's going to leave a great legacy for her children and for all of us. This company is doing what's called personalized medicine. People who have cancer, 80% of them who get chemotherapy don't benefit from the chemotherapy. This company is now looking at the makeup of each of us to determine whether or not the chemotherapy will help or hurt. So over time, we're going to have much more personalized medicine, and she can take credit for saving lives and improving the quality of lives for people as well. The next commandment is, thou shalt always treat your employees like you would like to be treated. I met with the CEO of See's Candy yesterday, another company in the district, and he made a point of saying that he has workers that have worked for See's Candy for 40 years. Now they work for See's Candy not just for the samples they get. They work for See's Candy because it's a good employer. Whether they're union workers or non-union workers, they have good quality health care. Their 401k program is one in which the company puts in 8% of their salary. Doesn't have to be matched. Puts 8% of their salary into their 401k. Now, I think it helps that Warren Buffett is the owner of See's Candy, because he's got it. He's figured it out. He knows how to make money, but also do the right thing. The next commandment, thou shalt think of the public good as much as your own bottom line. Every elected official hears people say that the invention or the service or their new gizmo is going to do great things for the nation. But I've never had anyone come into my office and say their invention was going to cause a catastrophe in the United States. So, public good is an important component. The next commandment, thou shalt question the status quo. There was a guy who sat in front of me at a hearing who nearly lost his job trying to question the status quo. He had worked for one of the rating agencies. And when the markets were going crazy with the mortgages that had been cut and chopped and then resold, I mean, no one was asking anyone on their application if they really made what they said they made. Because no one was holding on to the debt. No one had any skin in the game. So all the banks kept churning because they were going to sell those derivatives in a marketplace, and prices of homes were just skyrocketing. But one staff member at one of the rating agencies challenged and said, you know what? This doesn't make any sense. And of course, he almost lost his job over it. But he could look himself in the mirror every single night. The next commandment, thou shalt think out of the box. We've all heard the story of Steve Jobs. You've probably read the book that has some really inspirational elements of his life and then some not so inspirational. But he did create Apple, and he recreated it a second time. He got fired by the company he created. And then as it started to dip, he was able to buy the interest back. And then he created the iPod, which sent it into the stratosphere. And he created the iPod because he didn't like the MP3 players that were out there, and they were launching iTunes. Little did he know that by giving the order to his engineers, I want to have an MP3 player in 6 weeks. Did he know he was launching an incredibly successful division of that company? And I guess the final commandment is, remember what your mom told you. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. So whether it's the London whale or the other con artists that were out there during one or another of these financial crises, if it's too good to be true, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. So those are the 12 commandments. Of course, you know, if you're going to have something more than 10 or less than 7. So those are your commandments. Now let's open it up to questions you may have.